The 2022 Miami Hurricanes have their first chance to impress the 2023 recruits on the field this Saturday. So, who's going to be watching and who is Miami battling for?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. 2. That's where the countdown is now, guys. 2 days away from Miami versus Bethune-Cookman. Day 1 of Mario Cristobal running through that smoke for the first time in 2022. And you're going to have some big-time recruits in the stands watching. And that's why we bring on our guy, our man on the ground, John Garcia Jr., head of football recruiting at Sports Illustrated. John, how are you?
Doing well. Just excited like everyone else. You know, I know we're recording this on a Thursday. We've got the Backyard Brawl tonight and games through Monday. So, I mean, it's really a beautiful time of year.
It really is. And guys, every time John Garcia joins us, he's brought to you by LinkedIn. I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. You know, John, talking recruiting, this is the first name I've got to bring up today because not only did he have basically the game of his life this past weekend, 3 sacks against IMG Academy, and he is reportedly, according to On3, going to be at Miami versus Bethune-Cookman this Saturday, watching this game, watching the Canes in person. He's a Miami legacy. Rueben Bain, defensive lineman from Miami Central. His stock keeps rising, John. And for anyone who wasn't talking about Bain, after seeing the game, he had 3 sacks, I think like 5 TFLs against IMG. Everyone's talking about Bain now. And the funny thing about Bain, John, and I'm sure you've got a pretty good sense for this, about as good as anyone can have, even though like the On3 tracker has him over 91% to Miami. On 24/7, all of the crystal balls are for Miami. And yet, a lot of the recruiting analysts I talk to don't necessarily feel like Miami's even the favorite. Like we're looking over our shoulders at Alabama. So where do you think Miami's at with Rueben Bain?
Yeah, I think they're the safest bet, but the favorite is still hard to peg here because there's one sense that says, hey, you know, if he was always going to go to Miami, why wouldn't he be committed right now? Right? He's taken double-digit visits, family connections. He grew up in Miami, all those things, been a priority for the last coaching staff and this coaching staff. What more does he need to see with the U to jump in? And obviously you could counter that argument with, well, we haven't seen this staff in action, so we'll see come Saturday if that starts to change. But look, Miami's been the safe kind of hometown neutral option in this recruitment for the long haul. But I think, look, if you're an elite kid and look, you know, Rueben is the top 70 player for us at SI. I think we've got him ranked higher than everyone else, by the way. Play catch up, fellas.
And they are playing catch up because you guys had him ranked in the top 70 before he faced IMG. Now everyone's like, did we get it right?
I mean, he had 29 sacks last year. I don't know what else, you know, needs to be written out, but surely against IMG, it elevates your profile. But look, when you are that coveted and that productive at that position, a premium position, you're going to be recruited by everybody. And I think that for every kid, there's a window of due diligence that you need to play into here as a recruit to truly see if there is something else out there that can match this hometown feel and vibe. And I think that, you know, he's been able to do so this offseason. Took a bunch of visits elsewhere, Alabama, Auburn, Oklahoma, Louisville. I think he'll continue to vet those schools in particular. And look, you know, when Nick Saban's recruiting you personally, I don't care where you're from, what position you play, all those things, you have to at least listen. So yes, he's gonna stay in play for the long haul. And every time we talk about him, we'll say Miami's right there, but so are these other programs that have their own track record and their own elements to sell to Rueben Bain. So look, it's the safest bet, but surely not a lock for Miami. Although, again, he's the most important recruit left for me for this Mario Cristobal coaching staff. He's local, he's productive, and he qualifies as a head-to-head battle with Saban and these other great coaches. The three boxes that the last coaching staff couldn't check collectively. So you got to check those with this top remaining uncommitted priority. There's some committed guys you still want to look into, but among the uncommitted in South Florida, the conversation should start with Rueben Bain. But yeah, I still think Miami's the safest bet. He's going to take another trip, as you mentioned, to Miami Gardens to watch the Canes in action. And I think those are the last boxes he needs to check, right? He visited for spring practice a bunch of times. He's seen the makeup of this current staff and how they're going to run the defensive line, but seeing it in game action hits a little bit different. So for me, I think this is probably the last question he needs an answer to from the Miami perspective. And then he'll go and do some due diligence with the other programs where he has a lot less familiarity, and he'll go from there. But again, Miami's always going to be the safe pick, safe bet, and the one that is going to have the hat closest to the table when it comes to Bain's verbal commitment, whenever that time comes.
Now, according to Chad Simmons, he reported this, I think, on Wednesday night. Tyler Williams, who's top 100 receiver, 4-star out of Lakeland, apparently, instead of going to Ole Miss for an official visit this weekend, he's actually going to come to Miami for an unofficial visit and take in that Bethune-Cookman game. Now, John, you and I literally have never talked about Tyler Williams on this show because I've just considered him a Georgia lock. Like, it's all the signs have been pointing, and maybe they still are, to Georgia for him. I don't think he's had Miami as a finalist, and yet he's going to be visiting this weekend. So what might be going on there, and what does he bring to the table if he might wind up in Coral Gables?
Yeah, Tyler Williams is a quiet kid who's kind of gone about it his own way. But yeah, Miami was really never considered a top 5 type school for him until right now, because, Ole Miss was that last school he hadn't taken an official visit to. The other 4 in his top 5, he already took official visits to Texas A&M, Clemson, Georgia in that conversation, of course, as well. So yeah, Miami just wasn't talked about because he didn't put them in his top group, but obviously actions speak louder than words. And when you cancel one OV to go take another trip, it certainly sends a message to a degree that while his commitment's coming up in less than 4 weeks, you got a puncher's chance if you're Miami. And look, let's also be realistic about the likelihood he picks Miami at the end of this month is not great, even with this visit. Right. But
I agree.
Let's also be realistic about the recruiting process, right? Verbal commitments are what they are. They're a promise that, hey, you're in the best shape right now, School X, but there's still a long way to go towards December, early signing day, mid-December. So I think with Tyler Williams and a lot of these prospects, Miami's going to stay in the race. We've already heard them talking about flipping Jaylen Brown from LSU. The two DBs at American Heritage, Damon Fagan, who's committed to NC State. They're still recruiting him heavily. Conrad Hussey at St. Thomas is committed to Penn State. They're recruiting him heavily. So they're still in the flip game for a lot of prospects. So I don't think that will change over the course of the regular season. So I do think that a commitment is just that, and Miami's going to be a flip candidate to win some of these battles late in the cycle. But if you do grab a Tyler Williams, whether it's on his commitment day or more importantly on signing day, this is a game-changing recruit. I think we have talked about the different types of receivers Miami's recruited. You got 2 committed right now in Ray Joseph and Robbie Washington, who are both dynamic slot-type receivers. Tyler Williams is 6'5", former basketball player, dunk on you kind of wide receiver. That he's more in the Hakeem Williams build, and you don't have that on the commitment list at this point. So he counters what you've already built at the wide receiver spot. And let me tell you, outside of anyone named Brandon Inniss that Miami's recruiting, this is the receiver I would take above all the rest. His upside and trajectory is through the roof as a modern day boundary wide receiver. Vertical routes, 50-50 balls, back shoulders, all the trendy throws that you're making as a college and eventual NFL type quarterback. This is the type of receiver you want with a great wingspan, body control, and ball skills. that can help you operate with the widest margin of error. So Tyler Williams brings a lot of what you want at the position today. So another guy, top 50 for us at Sports Illustrated overall. This is a monster wide receiver recruit that a lot of programs are going all in on. So for Miami to have a puncher's chance today is a total 180 from a week ago. So I think obviously things are headed in the right direction, and the communication with Cristobal, perhaps Josh Gaddis, has obviously improved. We know he was tight with McClendon. So, that's why Georgia had this early perceptional lead with him, and obviously, now has the big lead with him. But obviously he was at Miami for just a couple minutes earlier this offseason. So I think that is something that could potentially have kept Miami afloat in this recruitment. But you'll take a puncher's chance on September 1st if you're the Hurricanes. So, let the chips fall where they may thereafter.
John Garcia mentioned a name, Brandon Inniss. He and a teammate of his, although they may be committed elsewhere, I know Miami's putting in the work, right? When we talk about possible flips, and that's a two-way street. We had a scare within the last couple of weeks about the Washington Twins, but they reaffirmed their commitment to Miami. I think we're good there. And Miami's going to give scares to some other schools. So, guys, you want to keep it locked right here, because when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of possible flips that Miami is working on here before signing day. Make sure you guys are checking out Bet Online. Folks, the season's about to start. Well, the season has started, actually. Week 0. We're in week 1 now. I hope you're on Bet Online every day like I am. It is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. Bet Online is your continued source for all of your sports wagering info, including live betting, which is game changer, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. Available free on Apple Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Available free on YouTube. And guys, we are pushing for 5K. I want to get it before September 17th, before the Texas A&M game. We are approaching 5,000 YouTube subscribers. So if you watch us every day, you haven't hit subscribe, do it today and tell your friends to subscribe to Locked On Canes. So recruiting, again, Miami's going to have some very important class of 2023 targets who are going to be at the game this weekend. Other players they are battling for. I don't know whether or not either of these guys will be here this Saturday, but I'm hearing some buzz, John, and we know Miami's in constant contact with certain players that are verbally committed elsewhere. Couple of local guys and Brandon Inniss, 5-star wide receiver, and Mark Fletcher, 4-star running back, American Heritage guys. They're both committed to Ohio State. They're kind of on my radar as possible flips because I think Miami is recruiting these guys still very hard. What can you tell me about that process and about these players?
Well, yeah, right off the bat, Donno, 2 positions of need we just talked about. Wide receiver is, you've got 2. You probably want to bring in 4 in this class. So naturally, the number 1 receiver in the country on Sports Illustrated, yeah, it's probably a guy you're going to continue to recruit. And then even a bigger need at running back. 0 commitments at this point for the U. I know Chris Johnson's another South Floridian who's on the board here, but Mark Fletcher is one who, his recruitment blew up before this coaching staff took over, and I think at that point there was always this allure of leaving the state and going up to Ohio State, bigger back, downhill, Big Ten, all those things certainly fit with the mold of what they are selling up there in Columbus. But you just know over time for both of these guys, with this coaching staff that is going to be relentless and shoot their shot, swing for the fences, all the cliches you want to throw out there, it starts at home. And if you're a kid in Dade or Broward or Palm Beach that is elite and is committed elsewhere, you're probably going to continue to get phone calls from this coaching staff. And that could potentially lead to visits, which could eventually lead to some commitment flips. So it's understandable positionally and individually for these 2 prospects. And with Inniss, I think he's as understanding of a prospect as there is, right? Very grounded, a kid who's had offers since he was in 8th grade and 9th grade. So he understands the ins and outs of the process. And he's gone through kind of the uncontrollable as well, right? He was committed to Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley. That coaching change happened and he totally reset. And his recruitment then came down to Ohio State, Alabama. Miami was in that conversation as well. USC, of course, with Riley, and he picks OSU. So if there's a kid who understands the need to continue to do due diligence, to continue to accept phone calls, it's Brandon Inniss, because he's been bit by that in the past when it was out of his control. So I think the modern recruit, and he's a great example of it, is going to continue to keep that door at least slightly open. And we heard about it at IMG Media Day with Carnell Tate. He was like, hey, Miami keeps calling me and Brandon Inniss to go take a visit. They're very close. They're both receivers. They're both committed to OSU, and they're both going up this weekend to Columbus, by the way. But, that duo, that could be something interesting for Miami to continue to covet, because they are very close. And, of course, they're both playing high school ball in the state of Florida this year, despite Tate being from Chicago. So it's interesting to track. I think it's something, again, these kids are going to continue to answer the phone. And like you said, it does work both ways, right? Yeah. The Washington Twins were potentially flip candidates. Francis Mauigoa has admitted to us, hey, everyone keeps calling me, everyone. So, it's understandable. When you want to recruit at this level, you've got to play both sides of that game. And I think if you pull it off with Brandon Inniss in particular, it's about as good a flip and as big a flip as possible in this 2023 cycle.
I'm going to kindly ask Francis Mauigoa to change his phone number, because that's one, even the possibility of him flipping would be terrifying, because I love, to me, that is probably the most important commit Miami has gotten to this point. Speaking of possible flips, a player we've spoken about in the past, I'm feeling less confident about the possibility here with Jurrion Dickey. So within the last few days, a Hurricane fan account on Twitter tweeted out a video of Jurrion, some of the touchdowns he's been scoring already in high school this year, and referred to him in the caption as a future Cane. Dickey quote tweeted that and said, "I'm staying a Duck, but love the video." So, case closed?
No. This is recruiting. I mean, we just been talking about it all show, right? I mean, there's probably dozens of examples of kids tweeting out their allegiance to one school and doubling down on it before having a change of heart. There are so many additional circumstances in recruiting that could play a wedge into one school versus the other. And look, it's tangible with Jurrion Dickey, right? He's visited twice since making that commitment to the Ducks. He's incredibly close to Jaden Rashada, the fellow Northern Californian, who's, of course, committed to Miami. I think he shouted him out for his birthday this week and kind of reiterated how close the duo is. And we've talked about it. Miami's got this need at wide receiver, and it's probably going to come via the flip game. So we've talked about Inniss, we've talked about the Jaylen Brown, and now Jurrion Dickey's another flip candidate, Carnell Tate as well, that fits that mold. This is another SI-99 recruit who brings something different to the table. 6'3", 210 pounds or so. Nothing that Miami has like that on the verbal commitment list today. So naturally you expect Miami to continue to court Dickey. He, again, has taken 2 visits and has not used an official for one of those 2 visits. So there could still be some Miami traction down the line for Dickey, although, Oregon fans got to feel good today relative to him coming out and saying that, he's comfortable with his verbal commitment to the Ducks, which is a tribute to Mario Cristobal. That coaching staff, he was the favorite Oregon was the favorite for Dickey in the fall under Cristobal. So there is obviously a great relationship between coach and recruit in this regard. And that's why Miami is still to be viewed as the top threat to Oregon for Dickey's signature come December. And we're told other schools are still trying to get involved with him as well. And like with Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate and Jaylen Brown, he is reciprocating that communication. He is on the phone with some other programs despite his public allegiance to Oregon. So it works both ways. As you mentioned, Miami still is very much in that ball game until the letter of intent is actually signed and faxed to Eugene over Coral Gables.
We threw out on Twitter this morning, and hey, you can follow the show at Locked On Canes. Follow us at Locked On Canes. We will follow you back, and write us your questions and comments. We read a lot of these on the show. So, I mentioned everybody. John is coming on today. John Garcia Jr. is with us, Director of Football Recruiting for SI. If you want us to ask John about any prospects, most of the names that came in were guys we were planning to talk about anyway. But I did get this from Austin Cosper, who said, can I ask you about Cormani McClain? I can, and I'm doing it right now. Is there anything new on Cormani? Because I know 5-star DB out of Lakeland. He's taken his time. Is there anything new on him?
Yeah, still taking his time. No early commitment plans, which is probably good news for Miami in this pursuit. Number one corner in the country out of Lakeland, as you mentioned. He's going to visit Florida this weekend. They're playing Utah. He's got friends on both rosters. I mean,
I hope Utah just kicks their butts. And like Cormani's like, I can't play here.
Yeah, his one of his closest friends is actually Utah's backup running back, Jalen Glover, who's from Lake Gibson and was a teammate of Cormani's over the last couple of years. So, some due diligence there from Cormani, but the Gators are absolutely in it for him under Corey Raymond. Alabama is viewed as a legitimate contender for McClain. And then Miami's probably right there thereafter. Been in the mix. Family's been to town. He took the official in the summer to keep the Canes in the conversation. And we're told that it's very likely he's going to make another visit to Miami during the season. I think the safe bets are Florida, which we know is 2 days away, Miami and Alabama to host him during the season. Georgia's trying to get involved. Other schools are trying to get involved to play into this theoretical top three that he has not confirmed of Florida, Miami, and Alabama. But right now, I think that's kind of the pecking order for Cormani McClain. But again, a lot of time between now and his decision and or signing day. And he's another one. I mean, number one corner in America. So again, no matter if he commits today, all these schools are going to try to stay in the mix. And I believe he's a kid who would reciprocate that going forward. He's the most familiar with Florida. He spent the most time there. Alabama's right after that. And Miami's one he's still trying to figure out a lot with. So that official visit was big to keep him in the game. Now they've got to stay in the game, under this defensive coaching staff, and I believe they will.
Tremendous stuff here. And guys, keep it locked because we have more to ask John Garcia Jr. about, including we've got to keep the longest streak since Cal Ripken alive here. And I got to ask John about the importance of facilities because Miami's athletic director, Dan Radakovich, who just came in from Clemson, he admitted like Miami's a little bit behind they're trying to catch up, but they are a little bit behind with the facilities game. So make sure you keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcast, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're 2 days away from the Miami Hurricanes. Take it on Bethune-Cookman, September 3rd, Hard Rock Stadium, opening up the 2022 season. John Garcia Jr. is with us. John, I lost count of how many consecutive weeks we've asked you about Samson Okunlola. This is like number 17 or number 18 straight weeks. Is there anything new on the pancake honcho and where Miami stands and, who Miami's top competition is for this 5-star offensive tackle out of Massachusetts?
Yeah, there's a little bit new. I think we were tracking this thing as 2 elite tackles, really 3 if you throw in Zalance Hurd, who were kind of the best available, and there was no clear timeline. Well, that has all changed, right? Monroe Freeling has come off the board to Georgia. By the time most people hear this, Zalance Hurd will have likely committed to LSU. Spoiler alert there. So Okunlola is really the last big fish remaining. He teased a big announcement coming soon, but we obviously confirmed that it wasn't a commitment. But since then, he has announced, hey, I know everyone's asking me about a commitment date. That info will be released pretty soon. So I think that will be the next step in the Okunlola recruitment. He said if he does take more visits, it will likely be in September. So if he does hit the road, I think it will be here over the first few weeks of the college football season. I think he took 3 officials in the summer. So he does have some allotment for some school-funded trips over the next few weeks. And those could potentially throw a wrench into the process, but he has also said, hey, I think I've got enough data right now to make the call. And we know Miami's been the program with the most buzz in the recent months. So if he feels like he's got enough data to make the call now, and Miami's been the trending program, you got to feel good, especially with Freeling picking Georgia, about Miami's chances to land Okunlola the sooner he makes that verbal commitment. But if and when he takes other trips, I think that it'd be interesting to see where he took those official visits. Ohio State's been involved. Georgia's been involved. Oregon, Michigan State have all been involved. Alabama as well. But a lot of those schools, kind of like Miami, have become pretty full along the offensive front. So you wonder how that could potentially impact a final call from Okunlola, who for us is the number one offensive tackle in the country. So I think the sooner the better for Miami. That has stayed consistent as much as we've been asked about Samson. But I am curious to see, of course, when he's going to make the call and those up to 2 official visits that he could take in the month of September. So we're going to find out a lot this month either way, to me.
Earlier this week, we had a chance, the local media, to talk with Dan Radakovich, the new Miami Hurricanes athletic director. He's heading into his first football season, and he said something about facilities that I think makes sense, right? Because people have been talking about a possible new football stadium for Miami. The Ruiz family has worked really hard, and they're spending a lot of money with this architecture firm to get these concepts drawn up and stuff about Tropical Park, but. And maybe that does become something Miami really looks into. But at the moment, Radakovich said something that made sense. Right now, they're prioritizing the facilities on campus, like this indoor practice facility you see behind me, expanding that because their student athletes, they're in the on-campus facilities every day versus a stadium you play in 6 or 7 times a year. So it does make sense to me, John, that maybe eventually you consider moving into your own really nice stadium, but you probably want to fix the on-campus stuff first, because I'm guessing that has a bigger impact on recruiting.
Yeah, it's about the day-to-day. And I think the facilities arms race it's still just that. It's still always it's an ever-evolving thing. I mean, remember the whole back and forth with fans on Twitter between the Florida locker rooms and the Florida State locker rooms and the Miami locker rooms, all that stuff. It's something you always have to refresh. It's like an update on your iPhone. So there needs to be one at Miami. I think it's pretty simple there. And what impact it creates in recruiting and with the current roster, which is important because you got to recruit those guys too because of the portal. This is where you're spending the most time. It's the recovery rooms. It's the weight rooms. It's the obviously the locker rooms, the IPFs, all of those things that occupy the majority of your time, and some fun sprinkled into it, right? Players lounge. Dan and company at Clemson put in that slide that you see on Clemson social media like every day. So you got to sprinkle in some fun in there as well to create that type of environment. And look, and it benefits a coaching staff too, because you know where your players are. They're kind of locked in on campus. They're not running around, South Beach or what have you. So I do think it's very important for Miami to catch up in that regard, because again, this is about the big boys. This isn't about winning the state anymore. It should never be about that at Miami or Florida State for that matter. It should be about the very top. It should be about the playoff. It should be about winning the ACC. It should be those types of goals. So now it's about Clemson. It's about Bama. It's about Ohio State. It's about Texas A&M, catching up in that regard to those programs. Because if you look up at who Miami's recruiting against, we just talked about it with Okunlola and Inniss and Fletcher and McLean and all these same players. It's the big boys. And those are the recruiting battles you want to compete with, which we've seen Miami do thus far. But to continue to win those over a longer period of time, in addition to on-field success, you need to present something that is comparable at home, because you've got all the other advantages, right? You're in South Florida, the weather, the conference, the path to playing time, the history. A lot of these other boxes are checked in Sharpie, but that one isn't, so naturally that is where the focus needs to be pushed a little bit more. And obviously with what Clemson has done in the last decade, Radakovich understands that as much as anyone. And so does Mario with some of the places he's been and the places he's changed over the last few years. So when you have that type of alignment in thought, execution usually follows it up pretty closely. So it's not something I'd be worried about from a Miami fan base perspective. It will get done and corrected, and you will catch up. Just a matter of how soon and how much is it going to cost. But that's their job to figure out, and I think they will.
I'm not going to worry about the cost. I'll let them worry about that. I mean, we see, yeah, and it's great because we've seen reported numbers like 100 million or more than that. So it sounds to me like they're doing it right. And John Garcia is always doing it right. Guys, make sure you follow him, John Garcia _Jr. on Twitter. Check out his work in Sports Illustrated. I mean, this guy, he's always boots on the ground covering everything recruiting around the country. John, we appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Always a pleasure, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure, believe me. And guys, you want to make sure for your second listen today, you check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022. It's an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from my pal Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combined to do the ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Guys, today was a fun show. We're going to have fun again tomorrow and probably fun on Saturday as well for tomorrow's show. We are going to do keys to the game, right? And you better not lose this one, but we will do keys to the game, Miami versus Bethune-Cookman tomorrow. We may have a couple of special guests on tomorrow's episode, so make sure you keep it locked right here. Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.